Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Today, I'm delighted to welcome special guest Catia Batalha, who is joining me from New Zealand, where it's 11 o'clock at night over there. So I'm extremely grateful to her for staying up for this. You can find Catia at catiabatalha.org, which is CATIABATALHA.org. And if you go / echoes hyphen echo, of hyphen the hyphen timeless, you will find her amazing book, which I've just read and which I'm going to mention during the episode because it's a stunningly beautiful piece of work. Catia is a psychotherapist, holistic coach, a yoga, philosophy, and psychology teacher, an author, a mystic. She's devoted to guiding souls on their journey of awakening, healing, and self-discovery. She has spent much of her life immersed in the holistic philosophies and traditions of the East and the psychological sciences of the West. And Catia's book, which you can see on the shelf behind me, is an extraordinary tale of a journey through exploring many of these things, but weaving it back constantly to personal lived experience and actual personal reflection and consideration of what works and what doesn't work for that individual person. So if you are inspired by this conversation today, please do get the book. It's a beautiful read. So Catia, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction. I'm very excited to be on your show.
Fantastic. So we had a lovely conversation in the pre-call, although of course, I feel I know you even deeper now, having read your lovely book. In the pre-call, something that came through in the conversation was this whole notion of the choice to live differently. In other words, this idea that in our lives, often there are all sorts of messages and pressures around how we should live, but that there's always the possibility of making a different choice, which we don't always, we're not always aware of that. I think often we forget that we don't have that choice to live differently. And actually, I will just say, before you even respond to that, I think most of us have even forgotten that the way that everyone thinks is normal to behave was actually not the way normal to behave and live in our lives. You know, we think it's like the Christmas tree. We think the Christmas tree is something that's always been a tradition for millions of years. No, it's only been a tradition for a couple of 100 years, if that, you know, and yet we think it's a timeless thing. So this theme of the choice to live differently, has this been a theme that's been with you your whole life, or is this something that has been more recent for you?
I guess it's been with me my whole life, and I guess I came into this life, and I had a lot of pain looking at the world around me, because I had a I had a mom who was attentive to my physical needs, but didn't really speak my love languages. Like I'm very open emotionally, and very connected to touch and to like a sweet connection between people. That wasn't really my mom. My mom was she was making sure that I had everything I needed on a physical level, and the person who had that sweetness and that affection was my dad. But my dad had a job that he was often away for long periods of time, sometimes weeks at a time. And I felt very, very sad, very lonely. And in me, I could have given into that. I could have just become depressed and become disconnected because that was easier. And in that moment, not even consciously, because I was a child, but there was something in my soul that wasn't okay to choose that path of abandoning myself. And so I chose to not give up on love. And instead, I prioritized love. And love became everything to me. The pursuit of having loving connections became my whole life. And um, and then more challenges came with that. Then when I was maybe 14, I found a partner that in theory, for a 14-year-old, I thought he loved me more than anything. And I felt super connected to him, and he told me I was his whole life, and I could feel it. What I couldn't really realize at the time was that he was controlling and obsessive and a whole range of other things, including compulsive liar and all sorts of things. I just wanted to have that love, but instead, what I had was oppression, which I was told was what love was. Because my parents were also controlling, so that just felt natural to me. You just control the people you love. And so I could have, again, went along with that and just become a prisoner of that. But instead, what that created in me was this deep longing for freedom. And so there was something in my soul that was like, I can't settle for being a prisoner, someone's prisoner in life. Like, I need freedom. And so that became a huge value for me. So then we had love and freedom. And then as a result of this relationship, which was abusive, and it was sexually abusive and all sorts of things, emotionally abusive, my body started giving me signs that that was not okay. There was something wrong, even though I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear that that was not going to be the love of my life, or that wasn't a healthy relationship. There was no way that I could hear any of that. But my body started giving me signs. It started becoming ill. It developed a chronic disease, an autoimmune disease called urticaria, which is, now I understand, a, a symptom of sexual abuse, amongst other things. But anyway, I was just feeling this, that my body was just not working well. And because it was not working well, it set me on a path of healing. But again, I could have just gone with, okay, well, I can't do anything. I was told by doctors that that disease had no cure. So you just can't do anything about it. Take some medication, which doesn't even work for more than a few weeks at a time. I could have just believed that. But again, something deep in me was telling me, this can't be it. This can't be life. And it can't be my life. There's got to be something deeper in life. And I don't know if that's stubbornness or what it is, but I just couldn't settle for something that wasn't aligned with me. And so I started researching this disease, and later in life, I did a psychotherapy degree. And in that degree, I understood what the reasons for urticaria were, and there's psychosomatic, very much emotional things happening through the body. And I went through this whole healing process. And because of that, I've overcome that disease many years ago. And it healed a whole lot of other things in my body, and health became a priority. So these are just some examples of ways in which I was somehow, if nothing else, I was listening to this inner guidance that just couldn't accept that life was, in some way, didn't make sense. And I know, as you say, in society, we just get used to things. Like, we get used to having headaches every day, or we get used to having whatever it is, menstrual pain, or being stressed. I often ask my clients, how's your health? And they'll tell me, oh, no, everything's great. I'm like, okay. Do you ever have any headaches? Oh, yes, every day I have headaches. Okay. What about digestive problems? Oh, yeah, my gut really doesn't work. So we just get used to these things. And I don't really believe that we should. And I believe that our body is trying to tell us something. It's meant to be healthy. And if it's not, it's because something in our life is meant to change. And the problem is, for a lot of people, they've stopped listening. And that inner guidance becomes quieter and quieter. And then we end up having lives that are not aligned anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you. I mean, something that strikes me in that is that it sounds like you, like almost automatically, um, responded to these difficult situations by then emphasizing the actual core point of leverage in the situation. You know, because somebody could look at any of those situations you described and come up with multiple different things that you could choose to work on. But you just went straight for the thing that was the most important thing. And now that's really impressive. I mean, do you have any idea why or how it was that you were able to do that, or that that was your natural tendency? Have you ever asked yourself that question?
Um, I don't know. It wasn't always this strong in me. Like now I've spent many years strengthening that inner guidance and that intuition. But when I was maybe 11, 12 years old, I was ready to give up on life. I had a plan and I was going forward with it. And I just didn't see the point in it and I didn't have any hope. So it hasn't always been that obvious that that's what I was doing. And I was often close to giving up. But I guess the synchronicities of the universe helped, something, whether you call it, I don't know if it's the ancestors helping or some positive forces that exist in the world or whatever it is, it came through at the right times when I was really ready to give up. And um, and often when I was, now I can look back and see, okay, this happened and I chose that, and that happened and I chose the other. But when it was happening, I just felt really destroyed. Like I just felt this horrible pain, and it felt like senseless pain. Like it made no sense. And I guess in my late 20s, I found the path of yoga, and not the postures as we know yoga in the West, but there's this entire universe of teachings and wisdom and tools and techniques around yoga and tantra, which now brought that spirituality into my life, and I can understand life as a big puzzle that needed those circumstances that I've experienced in the past. But as I was experiencing them and I didn't know any of this, it just felt like purposeless pain. It just felt like suffering. I went into a world of alcohol, numbness, drinking, all the things that are just coping mechanisms. So it did take me quite a while to figure it out. Um, and it just kept getting worse and worse because I was really not aligned. So I think things just tend to get worse and worse to try to get us to be aligned in our lives. And then in my late 20s, they reached the peak of suffering. When I'd put all my hopes when I lost that relationship and I realized I'd been abused and all these things have happened. I felt disconnected from everyone. But I had all my hopes set on one thing, which is one day I'll create a family of my own and I will have those values of love and freedom, and we will all be very happy together. And I put all my hopes into that. And when that moment came and I became pregnant and I started to connect with that, and I was just ecstatically happy. But I lost that child inside me. I had a miscarriage. And when that happened, it was for me like the total destruction of my life. There was nothing left of me. And it was in that moment that yoga and spirituality came into my life to hold me, to give me a framework for me to rebuild my life with different parameters. And that's how it came. So yeah, it wasn't always this puzzle that I now see like, oh, this was really useful, and the bad moments were really tools that I needed to become who I am today. Yeah, for a lot of it was just feeling lost and feeling desperate and having unhealthy coping mechanisms like everyone else.
Yeah. Wow. Well, well done bouncing back. But the other thing I noticed in the way that you describe it is that you were aware of the suffering. You know, you mentioned you have clients coming to you and you're saying, "How's your health?" "Oh, I'm absolutely fine." But
Mm.
actually, they are actually suffering, but they think they're fine, you know. Do you think that um, willingness to be in touch with the suffering, do you think that's important on the path of awakening?
Yes, very important. I'll have clients, I often write down these things that they say and I'll ask them because a lot of the personality that we create has to do with the influences that we had growing up, mainly our parents or caregivers. And so I ask them, okay, how was your relationship with your parents? And often people will say, oh, I had great parents. And, they move on. I'm like, okay. And I write that down. And then later on, when I start asking questions and we start unpacking things, and they realize I I was physically abused. I had a controlling mom. I had to take care of my parents, or all these things were happening. These patterns were being developed. But yes, they're just not aware of it as it's happening, or they don't see it as a problem. And yes, I do think that it's very important to understand that things are or were a problem, not to blame anyone, and not to be a victim of anything, but it's through recognizing those aspects in our life, the consequences of um the things that have happened in the past or the relationships we have in the present or what have you. It's through recognizing that pain that we can move forward with more awareness. And this is what yoga is in Tantra. It's kind of mainly the essential thing about it is to move from unconsciousness to consciousness. And it's only when we do that that we have a choice. Because when things are unconscious and we're just being ruled by these unconscious patterns and that suffering that we kind of just push down and think nothing of it, then we have no choice. We're just kind of a robot on autopilot living life.
Fascinating, because some people say, well, you have to suffer, you have to break down before you can awaken it. But you're not saying that exactly. You're saying you have to be conscious of whatever might be going on. So it's not the suffering per se, it's the consciousness of the suffering that opens the way.
Yes. However, to have that consciousness, often we have to experience great pain because it's often when things are terrible, when we're living hell, that we are looking for solutions and we acknowledge that pain and we try to figure out what can I do from here.
Ah, so your pain has to get so bad that you can't ignore it anymore.
That's often the case, unfortunately, or fortunately.
There's an I Ching reading called The Arousing or Shock, which says exactly that. It says the universe will keep giving you the lesson until you finally listen. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse until you pay
Yes.
attention. So
Yes. Yeah, that is a yoga teaching exactly like that.
is it really? Now, is yoga from India originally?
Yes, so that it is from that corner of the world, essentially. Yes.
Yeah. Whereas the I Ching is from China. Um, But I suppose the sort of Eastern approaches have got all sorts of commonalities and parallels between them.
Yes. Yes, yes. And I've studied just many different esoteric traditions from around the world, even South America and other places. And essentially, they are saying the same thing. They might have a slightly different framework to explain it, but the values behind it are essentially the same. This has been my experience.
Amazing. Well, an extraordinary journey you've traveled, and you've got this lovely light energy when you talk about it. But I also get there's a lot behind that lovely light energy in terms of grounded wisdom. And I know you've studied psychiatry and all sorts of things, as well as yoga and the esoteric traditions. So, would you like to share a bit about that part of your journey of how you came to actually explore all these different things and then it sort of integrate them in the way that you have?
Sure. So I started studying yoga and seeing these huge changes in my life. So at all levels in yoga, we talk about the chakras, the centers of energy in the body that relates to the physical part of the body, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. So everything is connected, and we study them one by one and see what that chakra relates to, which organs in the body, which emotions, and that's a path of healing. So, for example, let's just as an example, um, let's say the heart chakra, Hatha, it's called in Sanskrit, which is a sacred language in India. And so this chakra relates to the physical heart, also relates to the lungs, and it also relates to our ability to love and to feel acceptance and compassion, kindness, empathy. And it relates to that feeling of feeling connected to the other and altruism and going beyond the ego, and to a mental space that is calmer than the lower chakras that are more about ego, and and it's very much a connection with the soul as well, because when our heart space is activated, then we are much more available for the soul to shine through. So, and this is just one example of a chakra. And if this chakra is not working well, it's not the ability to love is compromised, or to give love, or to receive love, or to feel acceptance and compassion, all these qualities. So in yoga, we went through a process of going chakra by chakra. And you might have recognized a little bit of this from my book.
Mm.
But anyway, so, and healing those aspects of that chakra and those energies and those parts of the body. And I've had, okay, so let's just say I went through that process of healing myself to a degree, huge shifts in my life, and then started teaching yoga. And when I did, I started seeing those same changes in my students. And an example of that with the heart chakra is I had a student who had a serious heart condition, that one of those that you need heart surgery, or there's no hope, etc. We went through less than a year of yoga course, and by the end of that year, he had no heart problems anymore. So it was all about that healing that was needed and understanding where that was coming from, and that was a symptom of uh, um, a daughter that he no longer spoke to. Everything was connected in a way that he started discovering that. So I started seeing these shifts in my students, and thinking, oh my God, like I have to somehow share this with the world, but how am I going to share this? And then I thought, I'll change my career and I'll learn psychotherapy, and then I can merge those two worlds, the world of psychology and Western science, and the world of Eastern esoteric wisdom and holistic wisdom. And so in psychotherapy, many things were not holistic in the way that I've studied it. And it was a lot focused on the emotional side, but kind of overlooking how everything is connected, and the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the soul, how to quieten the mind, the influence of energy and environment, and So a whole lot of things. And so, yes, I had to bridge those two worlds within me so that I could then help others in their own healing process as a psychotherapist, but in a holistic way. And then at the kind of towards the end of that journey, I started finding, I guess, even more alternative paths, more along the lines of shamanic kind of teachings and practices, and connection with the land, connection with the medicines of the land. Um, yeah, also there's a Maori influence here in New Zealand, the native people of New Zealand, or we could say indigenous people of New Zealand. They also bring a lot of teachings that are well, indigenous teachings really about our connection with the land and with nature and with community, and with ancestors and with spirituality. So all those aspects that we've often lost in the West, being so focused on just our nuclear family life and our work life, and ignoring all the symptoms, and often these symptoms, as you say, just get worse. Yeah, like depression, for example, is a huge indicator that there are massive things missing in our lives. And yet, many psychotherapists aren't necessarily talking about all of those things. Yeah, and often it's treated like there's a problem with the person. But holistically, it can be much bigger than that. Their connection to all of these things that I've just mentioned.
Yeah. Fantastic. What a great combination to do. I mean, because either one of those, the whole yoga and all the esoteric wisdoms and the whole psychotherapy side, either one of those on its own is a massive amount of learning and practice. And again, that's another expression of intuition on your part, isn't it? Which is, all right, so this is the next thing to do, and bring that in now and incorporate that. And you actually um, beat me to the punch, because I was going to say, when you did trained in the psychotherapy, how holistic was that? And it was like, well, not really. Uh, but nevertheless, he persevered. And actually, I've seen psychotherapists who are like completely disconnected from all of the other things, and it really gets in the way of the value of their practice. I mean, it's valuable, but nowhere near as valuable as it could be. And equally,
I-
I've seen people who've worked with spirituality and yoga and so forth with no understanding about psychology, and some of them just, it's not as grounded as it could be. So I can
Yes,
see that combination's really powerful.
and it can actually be a big problem when these other factors are ignored. Something I find very important in someone's healing process is what I call shadow work and light work. Shadow work is what we naturally do in psychotherapy, looking into the issues, the traumas, the patterns, the unhealthy relationships, and all that, to see what let's say I say that everyone is the sun, but sometimes we're surrounded by clouds, so we can't see our own light. And so often in psychotherapy, there's this training of let's look at the clouds. And that's great, because we do need to see what's getting in the way of us shining. However, that's the shadow work, but we also need the light work, meaning we need to know what that sun looks like. There's a level of guidance that's needed for the person to understand, this is who I am. Like, I am an embodied soul who has a soul journey and came to this life with something to offer, and I have gifts that I'm not connected to and potential to awaken. And if we miss that light work, if that connection to the soul, to maybe the ancestors, maybe the land, maybe um, the past, the future, all the things, their purpose, if that's missing, then they might just be stuck in shadow work, and they might just get so deep in the world of the clouds that it's harder to get out of that world, because it really increases their resonance with their clouds, let's say, with their egos, with their problems, and when you start to really connect with something deeply, you start to vibrate at the same level as that thing. You start to become one with that thing, if you like. Um, and so if someone just focuses on their fear, or their anger, they start to create more and more connection with that anger. And that's a dangerous thing. Yes, we need to look at the patterns, but we also need to remember who we are, because we are much bigger than the patterns. And so for me, a healer, a psychotherapist, whatever you want to call it, needs to hold both so that the person doesn't end up getting caught up in that world of shadows and forgetting more and more who they actually are.
Yeah. Beautiful. I feel like you represented that very well actually in the book, which I'm going to ask you about next. Um, because you do talk in there about the character having these extraordinary experiences, these wonderful awakening and opening experiences, and also these moments of recognition of shadow aspects and working with those and grappling with those and going back and forth between those experiences. And in the book, you give those like equal weight almost. It's like they're both important. And the character discusses all of it with, you know, their partner and their friend as they go along. You know, it's all discussed. It's all just as important as everything else. But there's never any point of, oh, I'm having a difficult experience, therefore I'm bad, or I'm having a great experience, therefore I'm good. It's more like I'm a traveler and there's a sunlit mountain and there's a mountain in shade or whatever. It's almost like no value judgment is applied, which very much struck me. Would you like to share something about the book, how it came to be, and what it means to you as a gift into the world?
Well, how it came to be was quite a kind of magical, synchronistic story on its own, which was it almost didn't come to be. There was no intention for it to come to life in a way. And what happened was that I was meant to go to this place. I rented a place in a surf town in Portugal with the intention of surfing for a month. And the only thing I brought with me was my laptop, just out of intuition. There was no reason even to bring it because I was just going to surf all month. And when I got there, I put my back out in such a way for no reason. I wasn't doing anything. And something just broke my back that didn't make any sense. And I was bedridden for the entire month. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even go to the toilet. I couldn't stand up. That was how much pain. I had to order Uber every day for Uber Eats to eat. Otherwise, I couldn't even cook. And that was the entire month. I didn't know anyone in that town. And the only thing I had on me was a laptop. And I was like, what will I do with my laptop? And I started writing. And as I started writing, this huge download started coming through me. And I was just trying to keep up as best as I could with all these things that needed to be written. And I would write and write and write the entire day, nonstop. And at the end of the day, I thought, oh, wow, what a cool story that's coming through. But surely I've got nothing to say tomorrow. Because this was just really interesting things, but maybe I've got nothing else to add. And then that's okay. The next day, I would wake up and a huge download would come again. And I would write and write. And at the end of the day, I would have the same question. Oh my God, okay, now I've got nothing else to say. So this went on for the entire month. And when the month ended, my back came right. Like suddenly it healed and the book was written. So
Wow.
that's
Well,
the story about it.
I'm sorry you had to experience that particular example of the pain leading to something amazing. Uh, wow, extraordinary. And you work into the story aspects from your own life as well as the actual beautiful story of the characters in the book.
Yes, and this is how things interweave, is that while the narrative itself, like the story of how it all flowed, isn't really how it all happened, the timeline and etc. The experiences that are there and the teachings that are there are very much real. So yeah, and it's somehow I'd written other books. I've been writing since I was a little girl. Somehow I think when I was maybe 8 or 9, I created a children's book, that kind of thing. But I never really published anything for real because I don't know, it didn't really feel right. But this one I knew I must publish it because it was something much bigger than me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
I mean, it's a very integrated piece of work. I mean, you mentioned exploring each chakra one by one, and in the book, the character does exactly that, and explores each one in a variety of different ways, which takes it very deeply. And I love the way you described the whole story over a 12-month period, because when I was reading it, I was traveling along with your character, Sophia, and just imagining what would it be like to spend 7 weeks focusing on exploring, let's say, the heart chakra, the one you mentioned, through all these different ways of doing it and exploring it and talking with other people and noticing my own experience and relating it back to my own life, and then going back and sitting and doing yoga with it. And just imagining that in my mind, um, I could feel shifts occurring through following the story. I mean, have you had feedback from people of how it's affected them reading this book?
yes, and that has been a trend now that you mention it. People feeling that it's not just a book that you read, but a transformative experience in their own way, because everyone will take from it whatever they need to hear at any given point. Because the book talks about everything, but of course, not everything applies to everyone. So people take from it what they need to take in any given moment. But it has had that feedback of some kind of awakening or transformational experience at some level.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that what you just said is also reflected in the book, because the characters, every now and again in the book, one of the characters will say, actually, this bit that we're looking at now isn't really for me, or I'll explore it.
Sure.
It's great, but I don't think it's for me. And at one point, one of the characters actually says, I'm going, and gets on a plane and goes off on their own, you know, and then later on everyone meets up and it's fine. And that reminder of the free choice, yeah, we can explore whatever we want, but we don't have to follow it. And I think that's so great, because people are frightened sometimes of, oh, I can't go on that workshop, I can't read that thing, I can't consider that thing, because if I do, it's going to sort of take me over.
Mm.
Not necessary, you can explore it, you don't have to live it.
Yeah, and I think that's something I talk about with my clients quite a lot. I think it's quite important. There's a spectrum of disempowerment to empowerment, meaning like from the side of disempowerment is like you're a victim of your own life and you have no power over it. And the side of empowerment is like I am the creator of my own universe kind of thing. And when you're on the side of victim or disempowerment, this is not a criticism at all. It's just a fact that's just a spectrum. But it is a matter of action and consequence. So if you're more on the victim side, you're more powerless. And therefore, you might feel more afraid to make certain decisions. Oh, if I go to that workshop, some decision will be made for me, or I'll go on a certain path and I have no power over it. And um and even today I was saying to a client, at least here in New Zealand, it's a kind of first world country. There's very few situations in life that we actually have no power over and no choice. We actually have a lot more choice than we think. Even like when I was living in Portugal for a good part of my life, that's where I was born. And at some point, I realized that the world around me in Portugal was very negative. I had a stable job personally, which was a privilege in Portugal because the economic situation was so bad and everyone was very poor. And if you were lucky enough to have a job, you should just hold on to it. And there was all this fear around not having a job, and people were not very well treated at work at all, and they were kind of exploited. Like I would work 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. That was what was expected, and it wasn't paid for. It was just expected so that you could keep your job. And every year I would say, oh, you performed great, but we can't give you a raise. So every year my salary would stay the same, and I would never had any training. So all these things. And ultimately that was I left Portugal. That was the outcome of that. But that was a very difficult decision to make because I came to New Zealand on a tourist visa. I had 3 months to find a job or I would be kicked out of the country. And I just sold everything I had in Portugal and made my way to New Zealand, and let's see what happens. It could have gone wrong, but I had hope in my heart. And more than anything, I decided that I wasn't willing to stay in an environment that didn't respect my soul. And that was just it. So I decided that that wasn't acceptable. To not be well treated was not acceptable. And I went somewhere else. And that decision took courage. If I had stayed on the side of victimhood, disempowerment, I would have done what 99% of the people around me were doing, which was to go home and complain about their jobs and drink to forget. That was easy. That was what everyone was doing. What was hard was to do something different. And people thought I was crazy when I left. And people thought I was crazy when I abandoned my career and became a psychotherapist. To this day, I still think my parents think I'm crazy. Because they don't understand the choices that I made. I had a career in IT that was high level. I was under CIOs of multinational corporations, like as high as you get in IT, really. And I gave it all up to become a psychotherapist and a holistic healer. And that's because I choose to believe that I am a sovereign, empowered being, that if I'm not well in an environment or in a relationship or in any situation, I have the power to change that situation. And yes, it may cost me, but in a way that cost is acceptable because it doesn't cost me my soul in a way.
Beautiful. That cost is acceptable because it doesn't cost me my soul. Excellent. What a beautiful point to get to in this conversation. Thank you so much. So beautiful. It's been lovely talking to you, and I just can only imagine your clients are just so lucky to work with you.
Thank you. It's so kind of you.
Let's remind people where they can find you, which is catiabatalha.org, CatiaBatalha.org. And your book is Echoes of the Timeless, which you can also find on your website. So we've talked about an awful lot today, Catia, as I thought we probably would. Has there been a favorite part of conversation for you today?
I really enjoyed our whole conversation, but I guess also what really inspires me is the idea that someone might listen to it and have the courage and the empowerment to get out of a situation that doesn't serve them, and have the strength to decide, I deserve better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there any kind of because I think there's a lot we've talked about today that people could reflect on and contemplate. Obviously, reading your book is a great way to do that. Is there any kind of reflection or contemplation question you'd like to leave with the listeners?
I usually like to ask people to listen to themselves. That's the number one thing to do, because everything starts to happen when you're listening. When you're listening to the symptoms in your body, when you're listening to your emotions that you might not want to be aware of. So, I guess something to reflect on is in which ways are the listeners, in this case, perhaps not listening. That's something that could be a reflection.
In what way might I not be listening to what my
Oui.
heart, my soul are trying to tell me?
Mm.
Great question. Great question. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Catia, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Catherine. It's been amazing.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching and for listening. Do go and check out the other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Do go and check out Catia's book. It really is a beautiful read. And if you like the energy of these conversations and you feel like you might like to look into working with me, go and check out beingspace.world. Thank you again, and thank you again to Catia.
Thank you.